Today, we're diving into the final, brutal chapter of a dynasty that ruled Russia for 300 years, the Romanovs. After Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate during the revolution, he, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children, they just vanished. One minute, they were the most famous family in Russia, and the next, they were gone from the world stage, their fate a total secret. For decades, the official Soviet story was that the family was simply moved somewhere safe. But that was a carefully crafted lie. The truth was much, much darker, and it stayed buried for over 70 years, hidden under layers of silence and deception. So, our story doesn't really start in 1918. It starts much later, with a secret discovery that would begin to unravel this massive 70-year-old mystery. Just look at this timeline. The execution happens in 1918, but the grave isn't even found until 1979. And even then, it's kept a secret until 1991, right after the Soviet Union collapses. That huge gap, that tells you everything you need to know about the incredible scale of this cover-up. So when they finally did open that grave in 1991, the most important thing wasn't what they found, but what they didn't find. They were covered 9 bodies, horribly damaged. And sure enough, forensics confirmed it was the Tsar, the Tsarina, 3 of their daughters, and 4 loyal staff members. But that just opened up a brand new, haunting question. Where were the other 2 children? Where were Alexei and his sister? To figure out how they ended up in that forest, we've got to rewind back to 1918 and look at the family's final, grim 78 days in captivity. After being moved from a fairly relaxed exile, the family was locked up in a house in Yekaterinburg. The Bolsheviks called it the House of Special Purpose. And as you can tell from Nicholas's diary here, it was absolutely a prison. The despair is just palpable. I mean, just imagine this. Their life became this constant psychological torment. The windows were literally painted over so they couldn't see out. A huge fence blocked the entire world. The guards were deliberately cruel. They'd steal their things, sing revolutionary songs right outside their door. It was a total fall from imperial power into just fear and misery. And get this, as if being imprisoned wasn't bad enough, their captors played this incredibly cruel mind game on them. They sent the family fake letters, pretending to be from someone trying to rescue them. It was a setup, a test. And when the desperate family, of course, responded with hope, the Bolsheviks used it as proof they were plotting to escape, giving them the excuse they needed for what they were planning to do all along. So by mid-July of 1918, anti-Bolshevik forces were closing in on the city. The local Bolsheviks got nervous. They were terrified that the Romanovs would be rescued and become a living symbol for their enemies to rally around. They decided they had to act fast. So in the middle of the night, these 11 people were woken up. The excuse they were given was that there was trouble in the city and they needed to be moved to the cellar for their own safety. The young heir, Alexei, couldn't walk because of his hemophilia, so his father, Nicholas, had to carry him down the stairs. Down in that cramped cellar, the commandant, Yakov Yurovsky, suddenly pulled out a piece of paper and read a death sentence. Nicholas was so confused he just had time to turn and ask, "What?" before Yurovsky shot him. And then the entire room just exploded in gunfire and chaos. But here's where this story takes an even more horrific turn. The bullets didn't kill the daughters right away. Why? Because their mother had made them sew pounds and pounds of diamonds and jewels into their corsets for safekeeping. This makeshift armor deflected the bullets, and it turned the execution into a prolonged, gruesome nightmare of bayonets and close-range shots in a room thick with smoke. The key thing to understand here is that this wasn't some swift, clean execution. It was a messy, brutal, chaotic massacre that dragged on for a staggering 20 minutes from start to finish. The crime was over, but the cover-up? That was just getting started. It was a campaign of pure disinformation that would last for 3 generations. I mean, just look at the contrast here. The official story that the world was told was that only Nicholas was executed and his family was safe somewhere. The hidden truth was the brutal murder of 11 people and a frantic, botched attempt to completely erase any trace of their bodies. And the disposal of the bodies was just as chaotic as the murders. First, they just dumped them all down a shallow mine shaft. When they realized that was a terrible hiding place, they pulled them all back out. They then tried to cremate 2 of the bodies, Alexei and one of his sisters. The other 9, they just threw into a pit, poured acid on them, and buried them under some railroad ties. And this is the final piece of the puzzle. It took until 2007, but archaeologists finally found that second, smaller grave. Inside were the burned fragments of the last two children. DNA tests later confirmed it. It was Alexei and Maria. After 90 long years, the mystery was finally solved. But even with all the bodies found, the story isn't really over. There are these huge historical and moral questions about the murders that are still fiercely debated today. So the big question has always been, who gave the final order? The Soviets always claimed it was a local decision, but years later, Leon Trotsky wrote in his diary that the order came from the very top, from Lenin himself, who said it was just too dangerous to leave a living symbol for the opposition to rally around. And yet, there's no paper trail. No smoking gun order signed by Lenin has ever been found. The only signature on the official verdict is from the local command. So, some historians argue the locals went rogue. Others say, no way, this was a classic case of plausible deniability. The order was given verbally to keep Moscow's hands clean. All of this has created this really complicated legacy. The house where they died was torn down by the Soviets, but today a massive cathedral called the Church on Blood stands on that exact spot. The family has been made into saints by the Orthodox Church, and they've been officially declared victims of political crime by the Russian state. They're seen as martyrs, saints, and a symbol of a lost empire all at the same time. And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. The story of the Romanovs is, of course, a shocking reminder of political brutality, but it's also an incredible story about the persistence of truth. It shows that even a secret that was buried for almost a century by one of the most powerful states in the world can eventually come to light. The question is, how much of the real story do we lose along the way?